Welcome back to No Facts, All Logic. Today's topic is entitlement. Are you entitled? Is Cam entitled to anything? I know I'm entitled to Cam, like most people. Who's worse, kids or Karens? We'll find out later in this episode. So, Cam, my lovely co-host.
Yes, Joe.
What is entitlement to you?
Entitlement is feeling as though you deserve everything when you don't do as much as others.
I think entitlement as a whole isn't inherently bad. For example, when it's a good sense of entitlement when you're like, after working 40 hours, I'm entitled for overtime. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with that being said, there's a lot of like small things that we could be. There are a lot of small things that we could be entitled to. For example, if you're born in the U.S., you're entitled to be a U.S. citizen, right? And there's a big difference between appropriate entitlement and then there's a step, which I think is what you want to talk about broadly today, of when does it become toxic, right? Where is the line?
Yeah.
I personally think it's like, it is exactly that feeling of, it's almost envious, right? It's when it becomes envious of like, you should have it, but you're not getting like the respect or whatever that goes along with it.
Yeah.
And I think a good place to like think about this is like all the Karen videos and stuff. Really, I think it's just, I think those videos make me think of like more of like upper middle class feeling.
Yeah.
Like I think it comes from like a feeling of I should have more than I currently do, and I can see how the upper class is treated inherently differently than me, but I'm not a poor person, so why are you treating me like one of those lower class people?
Yeah. And I think it's hard because like there's different stages of different levels that people draw. Like there's like entitlement, like what you were talking about, where people who work, blue collar folks who middle class or poor that work, 50, 60 hours a week, so 10 to 20 hours of overtime, they're entitled to that because they want to work to provide for their family, right? But I feel like the upper middle class or like the white collar folks who were born into wealth and fame and power and all this stuff, and I think that's where the entitlement gap changes. So I feel like people are entitled, feel like they're entitled to more money, to bigger houses, to fancy cars, to all this stuff, but I don't necessarily feel that everybody works for that. I can't speak for everybody, but like a lot of people, like the Kardashians, the Paul brothers, very entitled. Very entitled. Feel like they deserve everything. They don't get something, they throw a hissy fit over it. That's the entitlement that I think. Like these Karens out there, like, and even kids feel like they're entitled. But it's all about like how you were brought up,
You were saying.
Exactly. But no, I just feel like there's different levels to entitlement. There's different phases or stages. But I feel like the Kardashians are, they're one to judge other people, right? But then they call themselves self-made and they call themselves this. It's like, no, you were born into fame and power and money and all this stuff. You're not self-made. Like, you inherited that. Like, I don't know. I just see it differently.
I also see like celebrities as different than like the normal random person caught on footage, because it's part of their brand. Like that type of like overreaction to slight slants or whatever, blowing stuff out of proportions. Like I have a hard time telling like, is this their brand? Is this just who they are?
Right.
It's like really hard to draw that line between of, especially when it's like your entire thing is like, I am the most important person in the world, and it's like it's a brand of narcissism, right? And with narcissism, I think you get this sense of entitlement of deserving more than what you got.
Right. Do you think that that's just like what makes an entitled person? Like just how they were brought up, and just over time? Like, I don't know how to describe it, but I get what you're saying about the narcissism. But is it just like people come from like humble beginnings, but over time, they become entitled
That,
because of their hard work, because of like it's weird to describe. But
yeah,
like,
yeah. Hmm. So what you're asking is, are if you come from humble beginnings, are you likely to feel entitlement?
well, like yeah, like does somebody just naturally, because of the upbringing, stay humble, or over time do they kind of evolve and change into becoming, because maybe they're working hard and they're doing this and they're doing that, they're pulling all these, working 2-3 jobs, and then they finally get to the point where they're making, $100,000 a year, right? They should be entitled to that. But do you think that people just, because of how they're, like you were saying with the people being envious, like they're jealous of their friends, envious of their friends, and they want that, so they feel like they're entitled because of what their friends have?
I think it could go either way, depending on like your personality types and stuff. I think I can definitely see like a poor person that broke out and like quote unquote made it, thinking like I am better than the others, or I can see them being more empathetic and saying like I came from here. It took a lot of effort to get here. It wasn't just me that helped me get here. Like I had families, friends that supported my business. I had a stay-at-home wife that took care of the kids as I'm out here like busting for the business kind of thing. So I can like, and you can find examples of successful people that have branched out in that way.
Yeah.
Like you can find humble billionaires and you can find narcissistic billionaires.
Right.
And then like we could get into a discussion of like old versus new money, right? Like those are very different personality types.
Yeah.
You would never see, or it's very, very rare to see like old money marry a poor person, but you can see new money marrying a poor person because they're relatable. It's like,
Right.
but old money never associates with poor people.
Right. And I just think that you have to, like, if people are entitled, like, you have to do something meaningful in order to become, like, not just, like, if you don't, I don't want to say not do much, but like, if you were born into a good situation and you had pretty much everything growing up as a kid, I feel like you're going to maybe not do as much meaningful things in life because you just, what I'm saying, like, you have your ways, you have your money, you have your inheritance, all this stuff, but you're not working as hard as other people. So I think that the persona is different depending on, like, if you were born into something like a poor, situation, like a poor family, middle class family, whatever it is, blue collar, like, you're probably going to work pretty hard, like, to earn your keep. You know what I'm saying? And then over time, you're going to be entitled to whatever you earned. I feel like if you do something meaningful in life, it becomes easier to become entitled for the good, not for judging other people and feeling like you deserve everything, like your own TV show or a fuck ton of money or anything like that.
Like become an Instagram model or that type of stuff.
Yeah.
To become Instagram stars or really go out of their way to become like a celebrity. What are some good ways you could like pop off without like seeming like you are entitled to this position and without being with a understanding of like still being humble?
It's
like,
hard because like, I think you can be like overly confident and like borderline cocky, but still be like not entitled, but like still be a good person. I think that in order to do that, like you can create fame, like you can, post like Instagram workout videos, or you can become a professional athlete. If you're doing charitable stuff and you're giving back to the community that gave so much to you growing up, and you remember your roots, I think that that's like the best way for you to gain exposure and to gain notoriety, and have that sense of entitlement. But also, I think that if you're doing, like I said earlier, if you're doing something meaningful in life, you can kind of earn that entitlement. But if you're just doing something to judge other people, then I think that that's a different set of circumstances.
Yeah, I think this is where I'm gonna draw off. If you truly do, if you're the best in your field, or you truly do something unique in the field, I think those are good places of where I say you're probably not entitled, or you're not like perceiving like that's your brand or whatever. It's people that like directly copy someone else's like formula, directly apply it, and then say like, I've earned everything. Like,
Yeah.
this is all me, baby. I'm here.
Right.
I'm taking over. Like,
Well,
that
like-
old guy, like, has
Right.
nothing on me.
Like you were saying earlier, though. Trying to remember the point. But yeah, I think it's just like when you have that sense of entitlement, you don't always think of like it's like that's what it is, like reality versus like your brand, right? And I think that a lot of people get this perception of like they hate the Paul brothers, right? But because they act entitled, they act spoiled, like they get whatever they want, they have their own brands, they're making a ton of money, but nobody still likes them. But if you met them in person, like in real life, and they separated from their brand, I feel like that sense of entitlement might go away. Whereas like the Kardashians just seem like their brand is their reality. Like there's no disconnect. There's no, you know what I'm saying?
Well, they have a reality TV show, right?
Well, no, but what I'm saying is like, and I think that's hard when you start getting that exposure and you're constantly under the microscope and like you feel like you have to keep up. You know, like in wrestling, like professional wrestling, there's a heel and a baby face, right? And a heel on TV looks like he's entitled, he's spoiled, like he's an asshole. But in real, he or she, but when you meet them in real life, it's completely different than what their on camera persona is. I think that's the best way to describe it is if you can separate somebody who is doing something meaningful but is entitled versus somebody who's just naturally entitled. Like if you can separate the brand from the reality, I think that's what can make an entitled person more like bearable. Whereas if they're just constantly an asshole, constantly spoiled, constantly privileged, and all this stuff, it makes it very hard for other people to be around them and to want to contribute to their brand. But you can't say the same for everything. It's all about what people's taste is too. Mm-hmm. Some people like that douchebag or that asshole, and they'll continue to keep helping that person grow their network by views and sharing their videos and commenting on their posts and subscribing and all this stuff and liking the videos, and eventually they're going to gain more and more notoriety. Just you have to find that niche audience.
Yeah. So when does it become toxic, right? Like that's really the question we're asking for. It's like
it's hard, but I think like when you really can't, like when somebody is so popular, like they literally can't go back. Like they can't disconnect. Like this is their being now. Like this is their persona. This is their character now. Like they've already built themselves a really good reputation. They're making a fuck ton of money off of people from being the way they are, and they really just can't disconnect from that life. And I think that's toxic because now I feel like you're impacting people around you, and then you're gonna start losing friends or family that were there with you the whole time on your way up. Now that you're at the top, you got whatever you want.
I also think it's like a sense of like they'll never leave you because you are at the top, right? So you're entitled. Like it can sense this like you're entitled to their love because number one, like a lot of your friends and families, like your relationship dynamics might change because all of a sudden like you might be always paying for restaurants now. I think when it becomes super toxic is number one if you push your community is like when you have a god complex it's definitely toxic, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's also like when you start discouraging others or when you are like when you want to isolate yourself in your community, it's kind of cultish. Like when you start going down that path line. Or it's like if you actually make a scene in public and start affecting random people outside of like your community, like if you like yell at a waitress or whatever for bringing you the wrong order, super toxic. And that's a lot of the like Karen videos and stuff. Is like a service wasn't delivered as you were expecting it. So I guess we'll bring it back down. Who's worse? Who is worse? Who feels this sense of entitlement more? Kids or Karen?
Oh, Karen's absolutely.
Yeah?
Shut it up.
I think...
Go to Starbucks and all of a sudden they're freaking throwing a, caramel latte at you.
Right, because a
like,
kid would
"Motherfucker."
never do that, right? You
I
could
mean,
never.
kids can be assholes, right? But kids are trying to figure their way out. When you're a grown ass adult and you're fucking throwing a bagel at someone because you wanted a bacon, egg, and cheese, not a sausage, egg, and cheese, and you're like, fuck that, dude, fuck the croissant, and you just like huck it at someone behind the counter, you deserve your ass beat by that barista.
So, I will say, Karens are rare in the wild. But you know what's not rare?
What's
a kid throwing a tantrum in the wild. Like, you can see that at the grocery store. You can see that in the bagel shop.
Here's a plot twist, right? Here's a build-up. You know what's not so rare anymore? Aliens.
Aliens? Yeah, surprisingly, aliens have gone away with good cameras.
Yeah, and it's all of a sudden, you could have 50,000, 50K quality, and all of a sudden it's like you're shooting on a phone from 1999. I saw that on a comment, but no, Donnie, my stepdad, yesterday was just telling me, and he has a good poker face, but I was trying to see if I could believe it or not, and no, I looked it up, and there was like this ship that crashed the end of the last, so the 30th of April, and I think it was documented like that night, and then the next day they kind of determined it like unidentified, like whatever it was, like undefined, and there was a ship that, so the police officer in Las Vegas had this spy cam footage, and there was this green light that was just shooting across the sky. Well, it ended up crash landing into a close by nearby neighbor's house, and the family was they were working on their truck, and all of a sudden it crashed, and I guess they saw like 8, 9, 10 foot creatures with like big eyes and stuff. They were hiding behind this forklift, and it was really sketchy because the cops saw it, so it's like they believed them, and then multiple neighbors, like their houses shook, their glasses, and I'm just like, no fucking way. Like,
no.
We got, like, and you always hear about these sightings over like a military base. It's training, it's this, and then people were storming Area 51, and a few months later we had COVID-19, so conspiracy. But anyway, but no, it's just like, that was a true story. So the cops were pretty freaked out too. But
you think we as a community we could pull off a scandal like that? Like,
I mean, yes.
Like, if we were a much smaller town and we're like, we need some tourists. We're like near Area 51. Let's throw a big balloon. Like, get all this fake footage, because that's what this is. It's a hoax.
How do you like? That's a hard part though. Like you always hear these stories. You always hear, from like the 50s until even now, right? And it's like, I mean, I guess you have to ask yourself, do you believe in that stuff? And do you think that there's a possibility? I mean, we can't be the only life form in the universe, right? So there's got to be something else out there. But why? How are people able to pull this stunt off every time and not get caught? Like, there's no trace of anything.
I think it would be, number one, I think it's hard to believe, like, we are the only life forms out there. I think it's even hard to believe we're the only intelligent life form out there. Right, because that's where we don't care about bacteria that might exist in another solar system. We only care about intelligent life. We could find a mole rat on Mars, and it's like, it's a rat. You know what I mean? It's like, although that would be really impressive. Actually, I think I would be hyped about a mole rat on Mars.
Well, it's crazy because, like, like the mole rat on Mars, right? But like, what's on? I think it was, what was it? Was it when they first landed on the moon? Astronauts were like, I think they're on the way up, their mics or whatever cut out. And then when they got up there, they were pretty like chilled by what they saw. And that was a story that I heard somewhere before, but like they were pretty like, they would not talk about it. And I think even I was watching a thing on the History Channel last night about Antarctica. And how, like, there was this Navy SEAL, he didn't identify, it was like Scorpion 1 or whatever was his identity. So they blacked out his face and, like, fucked up his voice, with the voice change or whatever. But I think Antarctica is one place that I'd like to go see for myself.
Yeah. Can I just say how much I hate how History Channel turned into the Conspiracy Channel?
Well, yeah, because you don't need like a degree or anything like that. You just write up some shit and sell it to a network, and then they'll run with it.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
it gains anything with aliens or any other conspiracy theory, like with Hitler, not actually dying in Germany, but I think he fled to Argentina, and then Brandon and I were talking about that one day at work.
Yeah. Can I just say, I think Hitler did die in Germany, and this
Why
is
do you
why.
think that?
With Zelensky in Ukraine, he has refused to leave Ukraine because he's number one. It's like a morality thing for his troops and stuff to stay in Ukraine and not flee to Poland. It like creates this sense of not morality, inspiration. Your people,
Like motivation type.
There's a specific word that is slipping my name.
Like honorable.
Morale.
Morale,
It's very like it impacts your morale a lot to have your absolute leader be in the country and leading like the armies and stuff.
Yeah, but they're fighting one other country. At the time, Germany was fighting against United States, Great Britain, all these other countries. I think he knew going into like this is it, like this is over. And I think Ava Braun was with him in the bunker or whatever. And Tim Kennedy had a show, Finding Hitler, that actually I think the Russians got a hold of like the DNA or something like that, but it wasn't actually Hitler's body. And then there was I forget what the doctor's name was. Brad and I were talking about this. I believe he was part of Nazi Germany and fled to Argentina and was doing trials, like studies or tests on twins, but was like this ruthless fucking doctor. Like if one of them had blue eye, like one of them like changing the DNA concept. So like one of them could have blue eyes, the other one could have like genotype. One would have green eyes, and then he kill one, keep the other one. It was fucked up.
You also have like Hitler being the most influential and stuff. I really think Israel would have found him because Israel goes into Argentina and kidnaps old Nazis. Like they're known for that, and I think if Hitler was around, I think even though he might change his face around and stuff, I think his voice would be so recognizable at the time. Like people would be like, "That guy sounds like Hitler." You know what I mean? It's like, especially if you're surrounded by other Nazis, and the Israelis went in and got a bunch of the Nazis from Argentina.
So kind of like a roundabout thing, right? Main point, entitlement. Dictators have the utmost sense of entitlement.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying. Like, if you're born into something, fame, money, power, all this stuff, you're entitled to do stuff for yourself, not for the good of the country. And I think that that's what was found with Stalin, with Hitler, with, Kim Jong-un, all these dictators who are just ruthless to the people in their country, but they are entitled to provide for themselves, not for the country.
I think there's a difference between bad leadership between a dictator and being selfish. I think it's kind of like old and new money, right? Like if you're a new dictator, I think like you can see a lot of them making bad decisions for their country, and some of it might come from selfishness. But some of it might be like, this is how we balance power. We need to work with the corruption, not necessarily uproot it. And this, it's all about like managing your people in a way that your country can function. And it just so happens that, I take everything for myself. And
But that's not entitlement?
I think it's a different sense. It is absolutely
that's
selfish.
Ruthless entitlement, in my opinion. Because what good out of the three dictators that I mentioned, and there's been plenty of other ones, but out of the three that I mentioned, did any of those guys do any good for their country, the people in their country, or for themselves and the people around them, like the government?
when I think of Hitler doing stuff like for his country or whatever, I think of often like he came from it from an idealistic sense, and in his mind, like cleansing the nation was the main contributor, like taking over more land so his country could be independent.
Like killing 6 million people.
I'm not saying Hitler was good at all.
I get that, but like, was that for the good, like, for his ideology or for the good of himself? Because he was pissed off at a group of people, whatever, and then he's like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna take over everything.
It wasn't just Hitler pissed off at these people, though. Like,
no, other people
Jews were very discriminated before like Hitler came to power, right? Mm-hmm. Like the movement after World War One, and what was a massive depression in Germany, and a lot of that anger and stuff turned towards the Jews, and it so happened that Hitler joined a party, and he's like, all this makes sense. Like it, of course, it's the Jews taking all the money. Of course, it's all of this, and it was just a finite point to be like an scapegoat to power was to blame the Jews, and a lot of people could get on board at the time because, you know, they were they what? I don't want to say something that's falsely wrong, but I almost think like it was sort of like the Jews were still like known to be like handling money and stuff in Germany, and so it was like their fault that the country is declining.
So do you feel like that's the like the envy that you were talking about with people, like Hitler felt envious?
I don't think he was envious. No,
that his country was doing, so he had to, or like, do you just feel like he, in his mind, thought that he was doing good for his country?
Number one, I think he did believe he was like doing good for his country, and number two, I think where he came from was a place of absolute anger and hatred, and it was just pinpointed towards certain groups, and then eventually spread out to anyone that disagreed with him, which was like at the next level. If you disagreed, you would go to a camp.
So you're talking like old money versus new money, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think that Vladimir Putin is entitled?
I think he's another ideologist, right? He thinks like he came from the Soviet Union and he wants to basically reestablish the Soviet Union. Like all his actions are to reestablish the Soviet Union.
Has he succeeded in any part of that?
I mean, he invaded Georgia a while ago. It took parts of their land. He did take Crimea earlier. Like he's been slowly expanding. And it's
what good has that done? Like I get your point. Not cut you up, but I get your point of like expansion. But what good has that done for the country and the people inside the country, not just himself?
Well,
because now they're in the middle of a war that's been ongoing for over a year and a half.
Yes.
So, what good does that do? That's only setting them back. And I get other countries go through war. We went through how many? Civil War, you know, like all this stuff, like World War I, World War II. We were involved in Vietnam War. You know, the Korean War, like Iraq, Afghanistan, all this stuff. Like, but could you say that, like, even the United States, was that good for the country, or was that because we felt entitled to go after certain things and pass it off for, you know, oh, we're doing this for freedom, we're doing this for whatever?
I think it's hard to, because every time we've been involved in a war, it's for different reasons, right? Afghanistan's very different than Iraq, why we got involved. Iraq's very different than Vietnam. Vietnam's very... it's kind of similar to Korea.
Was there like a commonality with all those, though? Like a false flag operation? So we felt entitled because wasn't Vietnam for drugs? And wasn't... was it Iraq? Or I think it was Iraq for oil?
So those are like very baseline stuff. I think Afghanistan was about terrorism, and also when we had troops over there, we started burning down the poppy fields and stuff, right? Like that, those two went hand in hand, which kind of crippled the Afghanistan economy, to be honest. because it was like their cash crop was poppy. And it was like, I think it's very simplistic to say we invaded Iraq for oil, because we've been involved with like Saudi Arabia on good terms for the most part. We've been involved with like a lot of Middle Eastern countries. I think we got involved with Iraq because we didn't like the dictator we put in there, right? Osama Hussein. Is that? I think that's close enough to his name. And then
Hussein.
yeah, but he basically invaded another country for basically drilling oil on their side, but then it would like tunnel into his country and take his oil. And he basically warned them and then invaded them, and it was that invasion that made the U.S. get involved. It's like, you can't be doing this, so we're just going to get rid of you. That's the deal with Iraq, as I understand. And then Afghanistan was more about the war on terror and going in and basically, the Taliban and stuff. I think it was like the reason we burned their poppy seeds and stuff. It's number one, it was like the income of the Taliban.
But like we pulled out. And you'll hear like Navy SEALs like Jocko Willing talk about it, Leif Babin talked about it. We pulled out of Iraq like way too early. We were actually helping their economy. We were actually helping. No.
You're thinking the wrong country, by the way. No, we're still involved in Iraq. We still
no. We pulled out before, and we had to go back because after the Battle of Ramadi, I think is when they pulled out the special operations guys, and they started pulling out different, and then they went back because that's when the Taliban and Afghanistan, Taliban, and Iraq, everything was becoming about them again. So we had to go back. So that's the problem is when the United States gets involved in something, right? Finish it. But the same thing, like if you're talking about terrorism, after we got Osama bin Laden, right? We were still there for another decade.
We're still in Iraq.
No. I'm talking about Afghanistan.
Okay.
I'm talking about so we got Osama.
Oh,
and
right.
We're still. I get you have to have an entity there, but do you think that we should have pulled troops out of there a long time ago or a couple years ago, like when they did?
I think with Afghanistan, I think a better direction for the American people to get on board with would have been much better. If we go in and we plan on basically being there for a while because we don't want the country to collapse, and the country really doesn't have a means to avoid a collapse without our military aid, then Congress needs to say, this is why we are here. These are the clearest sense. And honestly, I would be thrilled if Congress said, yeah, we're in Afghanistan, and basically after 50 years or so, they have the right to join as a state. Like, that would be really good if you establish a well-documented, democracy, and you have a bunch of steps they can take to become a state of the United States. That would have been way more helpful for the American people to keep. It would have, number one, given troops, motivation of why they are there to help stabilize, why they constantly fight terror and stuff, and why we're over there. But it's not like a right away thing. We're not there for 5 years and then it's like, oh yeah, you're one of us. It's like, you can vote towards us or you can vote to leave, but right now you are so weak that you need extra support. And then when we get to that 50-year mark, there will be a number of options you can choose. Number one, you can pay the United States military to stay in contact and make sure things are still not going to collapse when we pull out. We could pull out if you vote on us just leaving, or you can vote to become a U.S. territory and get basically essentially have this extra support. And once you're a U.S. territory, it's basically should be pretty straightforward to become a United States.
So you think that we can expand the territory past North America for the United States?
Yeah,
to the Middle East and to Europe and to different
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think America has always been like number one kind of expansionist and pretty open. Um, and because we bought Alaska, and that's not really connected. We have Hawaii, Guam. Like, we have territories that almost seem like not to match the United States. I think what makes the United States us is like our Declaration of Independence, our Bill of Rights, our these factors. And if a country can sign on to like our legal system, then I don't have a problem with more countries joining our country.
Do you think that people are more entitled because of the constitutional rights that they feel that we have? Do you think that creates entitlement too?
I think that simply being an American.
Because you always hear like parents like, "Oh, it's my right to do this. It's my right to do that." It's always, "It's my right, my right, my right," and it's like, I wonder if that has something to do with it, like the entitlement. It just seems like, "Oh, it's my right to do." It's like, okay, like, but that creates a lot of like these viral videos of Karens or other people like, "I know my rights. Like, this is my right to do this, and you don't have the right to tell me that." It's like, is that entitlement or is that just being knowledgeable? Like, where's the line?
Well, first of all, the laws wouldn't say like I can just do whatever the fuck I want. I think a lot of the like Karens and stuff basically will say I can do whatever I want, make up a law, and then say fuck you, right? That's what they do. But as far as a U.S. citizen goes, like you are in fact entitled to the United States law.
No, I just mean like the people that think like, because everybody's a lawyer nowadays, and everybody thinks that they know everything and they know the Constitution, forward and backwards.
Yep.
Like, do you think that like some of them don't have quite the knowledge that they might need to before they say that?
I think
they're spoiled, they're entitled.
I think so many people, myself included, talk about subjects they know nothing about, right?
Right.
And it's just like part of like the learning process of what humans go through is like, I hear this, and this is how it can fit into my political beliefs, and it fits in this way, so I hate it because of my previous political beliefs, or I like it because of my previous political beliefs. Instead of like looking at a headline, reading it, you can just take a headline and be like, oh, like Hillary Clinton emails, bad, lock her up, boys. It's like, all right, let's look at the nuances. Let's let the DOJ like do their investigations. Let's not prevent them from doing their investigations. And if they want to pursue legal matters, they should, right? Like, it's this type of like, I think a lot of people like the idea of America, but when you look at the system of America, so many people don't actually like the system. It's like people are like they're like, yeah, be proud to be an American, but it's like at the same time they're out there like, no matter what, will support Trump when he's being indicted and stuff. You know what I mean? It's like if you're backing someone that is facing like so many charges, and like if these charges are true, like he's borderline treasonous, right? Like that's what these charges are like against Trump, is that he's borderline treasonous in his actions.
Yeah, do you think, but people still follow people like Kim Jong-un, even though they, could have all these crimes against him, Putin, all these crimes against him, Putin with the war crimes and all this other shit, people still back him because they just were brought up that way. And I feel like it's not entitlement, but I feel like it's just, part of it's just being brainwashed.
Yeah.
And they don't have the freedom or the liberty to be able to choose who else they support, who else they do this, like we do. We have the ability to, support Trump or Biden or...
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have that. Or DeSantis or whoever it is, Chris Sununu. We have that freedom and that liberty. I feel like they aren't fortunate to have that, so it kind of sucks. One other point I was thinking about, I don't remember if it was I don't want to be wrong, so I don't know if it was before or after the Battle of Ramadi in Iraq that we pulled out. But I remember hearing Jocko Willink say that we pulled out too early, and then that's when the fall of Iraq started to happen again. So then we had to go back over there to try and help fix their collapse. So I don't want to be wrong, but if it was before or after Ramadi. But
Oh, it's fine. I don't even know
Yeah.
about that battle at all.
so that's like where Chris Kyle and Jocko Willink, Leif Babin, like if you watch the movie American Sniper
No, I haven't watched
with
that.
Bradley Cooper, you gotta watch it. It actually has to do with the Battle of Ramadi in Iraq and stuff like that. So
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like, when I see Americans like saying like, "Oh, I like Trump" or whatever, it's like, you clearly are brainwashed into liking America as far as traditions go, but Trump doesn't represent like what America is at all.
So what does America mean to you, and why does Trump not represent that?
So America is all a country is established law of what the citizens have agreed to, or not necessarily of what the government institutions will follow. Right? For example, the right to freedom of press. Let's look at Trump. Trump constantly sues people that and loses those cases. Right? Trump will sue you to try to quiet you down from talking against him. Right? This is known as...
But Fox and CNN don't do that?
Fox was sued, and they lost for slander, right? Fox lost a huge slander case recently against the voting machines because they had no evidence saying those voting machines were rigged on any level.
But is defamation different? That's different than slander. So people are defaming Trump because of inaccurate or false allegations and accusations. That's defamation against him. So I think that's different than just saying, "Oh, Trump's suing everybody because they're speaking out about him." I think if it was the same thing about Biden, I think, yeah, I mean, they say, like, words never hurt you, but, like, after a while, if you're defaming somebody because you're trying to fuck them over, right, and then it gets proven to be false, then you should get sued for that.
So
it's not like you can't freedom of press and freedom of media, but if you're defaming somebody, that's where that...
So in the United States, we actually have the hardest condition to prove slander because you not only do you have, it's kind of like the, as I understand, the same thing of like why Trump's in way more trouble than Hillary Clinton, but there's two steps of winning a slander case. Number one, you have to prove that accusations are false. And number two, you have to prove they knew they were false. With the Fox News case, you had them telling their viewers, these voting machines are rigged and we shouldn't have them. And when, that's one, right? Maybe they didn't have any evidence to found that. But you had the company of that voting machines emailing them saying, hey, these things aren't rigged and we can work this out. And after attempt after attempt after attempt, ignore. And then you have Fox News legal team saying, hey, we really can't be saying this. We really advise not doing it. But they continue slandering the company. Like, that's why Fox News lost hard on that legal matter. It's because they were ignoring. They deliberately chose to ignore the facts that were presented to them. And despite ignoring those facts, they spun a false narrative against the voting machines.
Okay, so counterpoint that was CNN sued when they slandered Trump about the voting machines and how the election was rigged against Hillary Clinton.
What do you mean?
Because CNN and MSNBC and all the left-wing freaking media outlets went on slandering Trump, defaming him, literally crying because they were saying it was rigged and all these other people. And I'm like, so how is that the same? How is that not the same thing?
Number one, it's like there's people's reaction, right? Like you're talking about people crying and stuff. It's like, well, they're emotionally attached to a candidate. But the difference between someone feeling Like that's the difference.
But
It's
the
like
whole Russia
Fox News-
correlation.
What?
The whole Russia correlation that people were spinning, and then it got literally proven to be false. But people like Don Lemon, and I forget the other one. His brother was a governor in New York. Chris Cuomo. They were going on, and Rachel Maddow were all like, "Oh, Trump's correspondent, is conspiring with Russia, and that's why, the voting machine was rigged and all this stuff, and Trump was working with the Russians, and Trump this, Trump that." And then it got proven to be false, but they spun that narrative, and nothing happened.
So one thing that wasn't proven wrong is that Russia was in fact influencing like social media, right? And so there was like a foundational piece, and it was undeniable that Russia was pushing this media of pro-Trump. And that is why it was like, hey, this is kind of sketchy over here. This should be looked into, because we don't want other countries influencing the stuff that goes on in our country, right? That's actually a law. That you can't have outside countries influencing our elections.
But you can conspire and have scandalous activities with other, like Hunter Biden in Ukraine. He can funnel millions of dollars, but that's different. That's different.
No one voted for Hunter Biden.
No. I know, but I'm just saying, like, if Joe Biden did it, right? And Hillary with all the emails, and she didn't get prosecuted for anything.
She
right?
wasn't deeply investigated, though.
Yeah, and then why did it get dropped?
Because there wasn't... So, was she negligent? Yes. But
she knew what she was doing.
You couldn't prove she was intentionally... You couldn't prove that she was intentionally doing it. You know what I mean? Like, there's a big difference of intentionally doing something and accidentally doing something. And, like, the evidence pointed out to, like, it was more negligent than hostile. You know what I mean? It's not like she was copying emails, sending it to Russia, or sending it to other... Like, she wasn't copying classified information.
But why delete the emails in the first place? If you have nothing to hide, why delete them in the first place?
What, people just delete emails? Like, that's how certain people organize.
No. I'm just saying, like, when you're in that level of power in the government, right, and you're deleting emails that other people can never access, why? Is my question.
So it's
and
like...
then it never gets brought up. She never gets prosecuted. She gets deeply investigated, but nothing ever happens.
There's just not enough evidence. Like, versus...
it got deleted. Why?
What? So it's like...
Like, if I delete a junk email, right, it's just because I don't need it. But if I'm in that power, that position of the government, I should not be deleting anything.
Why?
Why would you? If you have nothing to hide, why would you?
What? Because it's not like you're at all in any expectations of, like, yeah, I will be investigated.
Because what if there was some serious shit and she was conspiring with another country, like Russia or Ukraine or some other fucking China? Mm-hmm. What if she was conspiring with them? You'll never know. And it just gets dropped every time.
Right, but
so
point to a law where... So if it was the law that said you can't delete emails, and she was found to be deleting... If you want that to be the rule, I would say, push Congress into... Alright, sorry about that, folks. Battery's dying, so we don't know how much time we have left. You want to say something before we kick the show off?
Yeah, I just want to let you guys know it was a great podcast. Thanks for listening, whoever does. Matt Rice sucks, has no skill, so I just want to get that out there. But
yeah, I'm not going to agree with you on that, but, we
don't
might
even
be
cop out. Don't even cop out. You just told me before.
He's not my cup of tea, but, he might be some others. Ladies.
Yeah, all the ladies, which is fine. But,
All right.
But, yeah, I'll let you talk. I was going to talk
All
about
right.
Sean.
Let us know in the comments below if you are entitled, because you are, you stupid Americans. See you all next week.
I just wanted to get a rise out of people. Matt Wright doesn't actually suck. I just wanted to piss some people off. That's all.